Bitcoin's price isn't random. It is volatile. At the same time, it's following a predictable path that's rooted in math and economics, and that's the power law from physics. Giovanni Santasozi, probably saying that wrong, Italian guy, is a physicist. And in physics, there's a rule, a law called the power law. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand how the power law can be applied to Bitcoin, as it can be applied to other things in life. We're going to apply it to the Bitcoin power law and how it can shape the future of price projections. And really what it's going to help us do is separate the signal from the noise in what's going on in the marketplace and see through that wild volatility. The math will actually make a little more sense as we get into this here. So really, what is a power law? It started in physics, but it can be applied to many things in life. In particular, it's the relationship where one quantity varies as a power of another. So it's the relationship between one thing and another thing, and this can be implied in a lot of different areas. So I'll give you a quick example. In city planning, for example, if you look at the growth of a city and the population, there is a range in which the number of gas stations lands between as the population grows. Okay, it always just lands between this lower end and this higher end. But there is no mayor of the gas stations, or they're not having city meetings about, well, we need this many gas stations per the population as it grows. That doesn't happen. These are very natural things occurring in the environment, and they fall within these bands. So this physicist said, hey, with this power law, he started to apply it to other areas and relationships between things across the board. And what he came up with is that this can also be applied to Bitcoin. And that's what we're going to dive in today, and we're going to take a look at this in detail, okay? And so what we're going to do is Bitcoin's price movement exhibits power law behavior due to the adoption of supply and demand. And ultimately, when the power law has been back tested against the price of historical Bitcoin, it has landed within 99% accuracy, which is unbelievable, right? Now, past performance is not indicative of future performance. I get that. And none of this is financial advice. This is educational. And so take that with a grain of salt. But what we're going to do is we're going to dive in and take a look at the power law and how it can be applied, okay? So really, it's a logarithmic price scale is what we're going to look at, and it's going to have upper bands and lower bands where Bitcoin's price typically lands between. If anybody's familiar with technical analysis, this would be support levels and resistance levels. But this is talking about the lowest low and the highest high, right? There's obviously support and resistance levels all throughout that process in typical TA. We're just going to be looking at the most extreme instances there, right? So why does this work? Well, it's because Bitcoin's a fixed supply at 21 million Bitcoin, right? Which drives scarcity. But then there's exponential adoption rates. The network effect is more people do it, they get in. But because of the limited supply, it's going to affect the price because it's inelastic. It's going to go up fast, right? And then the other thing is what you're going to see is these peaks, these valleys, and this has to do with the 4-year Bitcoin cycle. We'll get into that in a different session. But what it means is the supply of Bitcoin that is entering the market is on a very specific schedule, and it gets halved every 4 years. And so what happens if if we remove half of the housing on the market? What's going to happen? The price is going to shoot up. If you remove half of anything from the market, the price will naturally go up based on supply and demand, right? So you're going to see this cycle in this chart that I'm about to show you, right? Now here's the thing. Some people argue that this model looks like it doesn't take into effect black swan events or external events that can happen. And yeah, that's fair, but so far this has worked pretty accurately, all right? So what I want to do is I'm going to pull this up here real quick. I'm going to minimize this. And this is the Bitcoin Power Law. And a really great resource is if you go to Bitbo. They've got these amazing charts, and we'll get into some of the other ones. This one's really good, the Bitcoin Power Law. And what you can see here, this is the historical data from 2011 which is typically when we started to account for the pricing and monitor that for Bitcoin. Yes, it existed in 2009. Price was nothing, right? It was pretty much nothing for the first year or so. So, anyways, this, as you can see here, you can see how this follows a pretty specific pattern, right? So what you have is a halving probably around here, and then we get a peak after the halving, and then it comes back down. And then there's another halving, and then we're going to have a peak. So you can see these cycles as we go through. But what's most interesting is that this is the power law overlaid in this bottom level as the support level. So you can see here, Bitcoin has almost never gone below these support levels, okay? Which is unbelievable. Now, you can also see it really plays very tightly with the resistant levels in purple on the top. You can see here in 2013 and 2014, we peaked just above it, but otherwise, look at this. It's unbelievable how tight it's staying within this range, all right? Again, doesn't indicate future performance, but it looks pretty accurate, right, as we go through this. And so what's interesting here is that if we extrapolate this out, we can start to look at future years. So if we say, okay, we're in 2024 right now, we're entering into 2025. Well, what does the summer of 25 look like? Okay, so we're looking at, about $120,000. This is about July, halfway through the year, up to 450,000. I don't see us quite getting to 450, but I do see that 120 being absolutely realistic. Okay, but here's where it starts to get interesting. There's a lot of concern that, okay, Bitcoin's price will drop, which it absolutely does. You see it over and over and over again. Okay, so this is a scary drop, right? All right, let's go to this one. From 20,000 down to just over $2,000. That is a scary drop, okay? But here's what's interesting, is that if you scroll this back, let's say 3 years to the previous low, look at that, $225 to $2,500. That's almost 10x return over that period of time, even if you got in at, let's say you got in at both those lows. Well, let's go back. Let's say you got in at the top here. You got in at the top at $1,000, okay, 2014. And let's go to the next, after that halving, right? You're at 2,400. That's still a great return, right? So even if you get in at these peaks here, all right? So let's say you get in here at, let's see here. What do we got? 55,000. So this is probably like 69,000. Let's just call it that, right? So 63,000. If I scroll around, I can get it to the 69, but that's about the old all-time high. Now here's the thing. Okay, even if you bought, now this is in November of 2021. All right, let's scroll this out. Okay, so you bought at the peak. Well, how long does it take for you that the bottom will never be below that? It's $63,000. Okay, that's 2024. So as long as you're willing to hold, okay, so that's 3 years later. The price should never go below, even if you bought at the peak. So just stay in Bitcoin for 4 or more years, and life's going to be okay. So let's say right now you say, hey, Bitcoin's a little too pricey right now. It's at $97,000, okay? Okay, let's say you buy at the peak, and this is in November, or let's just say here, November of 2024. Let's scroll this out, okay? And where does 95,000 show up again? The lowest it should be, you wait until, here we go, December of 2027. So again, 3 years. You wait 3 years, okay? And that is now the new low, with the potential of that being 268 or 882. This is what's so cool about this, is think about the lows. Sometimes not the highs. Think about the lows. And so if we extrapolate this out and say, okay, if you're going to hold from today, you get in at 97. Let's go out 4 years, okay? So let's go to December of 28. December of 28 is 130. Even if you get in now at what technically is considered a high, there's still that 30% upside, okay? Now, that's the low, but you can see here it doesn't live at the lows. It pops up and above. So you can see how this green line is that linear regression fit. It's where it lands a lot of the time. Well, now you get in 100, and let's say it goes to 300. That's 3x in that amount of time. In order, based on the law of 72, let's say you get a 10% return in the stock market and divide that by 72. It takes you 7 years, right, to double your money. Well, if you can triple your money in 4 years, that's the same as putting your money in the stock market for 21 years. Gets interesting, okay? Now, let's extrapolate it out. Let's have a lot of fun here, and let's go to 2038. Look at this. By 2038, and this actually says 2037, but let's just call it 2038. Bitcoin's floor, it will go above 1 million and stay above 1 million going forward. So although $100,000 might seem like a lot today, if you extrapolate this out, what is that, 14 years, it'll never be below 1 million. A 10x return in 14 years is unbelievable. Start to look and play around with this, I recommend a little bit, because it can be fascinating and it can give you more comfort and calm in these situations. It also lets you know, hey, if you're below this regression line, might not be a bad time to buy, right? That's another takeaway that you can have as well. So this one is fascinating. It's the mathematics. Again, it doesn't mean that it's going to perfectly fit this line, but let's say it does. Let's say it does, okay? And by 2040, you're looking at a Bitcoin low of 1.6 million and an average in the regression line is at $5 million. Things can get very interesting if you get in now. Okay? So it might feel like we're late. In reality, we're early from the standpoint of adoption. Institutions are starting to get into it. We're looking at countries putting it as part of their reserve. And so it's just going to be a network effect of more and more people getting in. The demand is absolutely there. The supply is limited. This could get very interesting quickly. Okay, so I do recommend checking out the Bitcoin Power Law. That is a great resource. A lot of other good ones on Bitbo. And so really, one of the things is if you dollar cost average into the strategy, you're gonna do pretty well, in my opinion. But let me know in the comments. Put like, subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you feel the Power Law is interesting, if you think it can continue on this path, and it really makes Bitcoin seem more valuable than it even is today when you extrapolate it out into the future. So maybe in the next videos we can dive into the 4-year cycles. We'll get into some of those. But remember, knowledge is power, and with Bitcoin, it might just be a key to your wealth, one of those drivers. A lot of people who say, oh, I'm not investing in it because I don't understand it. When we were born, look at those. I don't know how that happened, but we got explosions going everywhere. That's how exciting knowledge is. When we were born, we didn't know how to speak English, right? We learned it. When we were born, we didn't know economics. We didn't know math. Whatever you're doing with your career, sales, doctor, we didn't know any of these things. We learned everything. And so everybody can learn Bitcoin. And once you learn it, what you typically find is that as their education and knowledge grows, so does their investment in the resource. And if Bitcoin is going to be $1 million plus in a decade or so, might be worth exploring and learning a little bit more about it now. So that's a great resource. And Bitcoin 2038 never goes below $1 million again. Recommend diving in. So thank you. And again, like, subscribe, and let's get on this journey together.